Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Weekly Watch, a show where I go over the movies that I watched. I like movies. I love movies. I'm going over this for this first episode and this first episode only because I think it'll be obvious if I do more episodes that I really like movies. And I try to watch movies a lot. Sometimes I don't get around to watching a lot of movies, but sometimes I do. In the last week, I've seen Fargo, I watched Burning, I watched The Master, I watched Part 2 of the Berserk Golden Age Arc Trilogy, I watched Django Unchained, and I watched Fantastic Planet, and I watched Vampire. That's a lot of movies. I don't necessarily plan on talking in depth about all of them. I used my letterbox here to help me figure out what all I watched in the last weekish. I put a couple posters in the thumbnail, and usually I feel like I'm going to put whatever I want to talk about the most in the thumbnail. And so the movies I obviously want to talk about the most are Django, The Master, and Fantastic Planet. But first, before talking about those three, I'm going to talk about the other movies real briefly. Firstly, Fargo. It's a classic from my understanding. I haven't seen Fargo before. In fact, I didn't really know much about it. I was excited to see that, not Pete Postlewaite, Peter Stormare was in it. I love Peter Stormare. He's kind of a character actor and pops up here and there in various movies. He does pop up in a movie with Pete Postlewaite. He's in The Lost World Jurassic Park. Fargo is this really, it's a Coen Brothers film, and it's a very dry wit, like all of the Coen Brothers films. One of my favorites of theirs is Raising Arizona. It's, in fact, I think my favorite of theirs. And Fargo is along the same lines of just really dry humor, matter of fact. Things just happen, and it's like, oh, well, that's a shame, and then they move on. So Fargo is about a man who hires two like hitmen to kidnap his wife so that his father-in-law will pay them $1 million, which they will get a cut of and then give him the rest of the money because he's in really bad need of the money. And the antics that ensue because of that. For the most part, you're following a detective character. Forget the actress's name, and I forget the character's name. You follow her and her trying to figure out what's going on, and it's all with very thick Minnesotan accents, which I can attest are pretty accurate because I have quite a bit of family that lives up in Minnesota, and yeah, they all have that thick accent and are all very kind of kind, like Canadians almost. I really liked Fargo a lot. It was a hoot. I also watched Burning, which I feel like is kind of with The Master, Django, and Fantastic Planet in terms of how much I liked them and how much I want to talk about them. Because it is an interesting film. It's a South Korean film. Uh, who did it? It's not Bong Joon-ho. Lee Chang-dong, who apparently is a fantastic filmmaker on the level of Burning was... I don't really think it's much of a spoiler to talk about. It's kind of a thriller mystery, somewhat of a coming-of-age story in a way. You follow this guy who hooks up with a girl in the first, like, half hour of the movie, and she then goes off to Africa, and then comes back with a new guy, played by Steven Yeun from The Walking Dead, weirdly enough. Not weird, but it was unexpected. He usually doesn't do, like, Korean language films. She comes back with Ben, is his name, and he's very clearly not normal. There's a couple moments early on that kind of hint at something a little bit more sinister and wrong with him. And it is, and the guy is kind of, from the beginning of the movie, is kind of disheartened to see that, oh, she's gotten with someone else. I thought, you know, maybe we could have been something, but oh well. And kind of follows them around, third wheeling it for most of the movie until some stuff happens. I think the title Burning is very appropriate for it because it is a slow movie. It is a slow burn. It was very impressive. I liked it a lot. Everyone does a fantastic job acting wise, and it has some gorgeous cinematography, and it was very good. It was up there for me as one of the better movies I've watched this last week. I watched the second part of the Golden Age trilogy of Berserk, which is on Netflix if anyone wants to watch it. Personally, I prefer the manga to the Golden Age trilogy. The manga has a lot more scenes and a lot more depth to it. The Golden Age trilogy serves as a very good like best of that. I'm gonna try not to go super into Berserk because I absolutely love Berserk. I have 5 of the like giant deluxe volumes of Berserk. It is one of my favorite pieces of fiction ever. So I'm watching these movies because of that. So far, they're okay. Again, they cut a lot of the things that I like from the manga. Like they don't have like the best scene from the Golden Age arc, in my opinion, uh, which is a little bit of a shame. But they do the job, and they are still very enjoyable. Vampire was something that I wish I loved because I like old black and white monster movies. Like The Wolfman is one of my favorites. King Kong, of course. Dracula, Invisible Man, The Mummy, all those. And I wish that Vampire was kind of on the same level as those, but I just, for whatever reason, couldn't really connect with it. It's got some great imagery in it. There's really clever use of shadows, and it is dripping with like a gothic horror atmosphere. But for whatever reason, I just didn't connect with the story or the characters or anything. It was a little awkward in places. It kept interrupting kind of the flow of the movie to show like pages from the book or to show a page of text that explains how a character is feeling, and it didn't quite feel right for me. I would have, I wish I loved it more. Okay, now to talk about the 3 that I really want to talk about a lot. Part 1, The Master. The Master is a very weird film. Once it was done, I didn't know how I felt about it. I think it is a masterpiece. I think I really liked it. I think I loved it a lot. It is not a movie with like a story or a plot, really. It is more a character study, and it more follows a relationship than it does a plot. There's not really like a goal for any of the characters. It's just following them as they change and grow, or don't grow, depending on your interpretation of certain aspects of the film. And that's one of the things, that a lot of it is kind of left open to your interpretation, and I can see how that would be upsetting and annoying for some people. But The Master is a 2012 film done by Paul Thomas Anderson. It's the second film of his that I've seen. First was There Will Be Blood, which I also loved. It stars Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix as your main characters that you follow, and it is about this relationship between these 2 people. Joaquin Phoenix is a horrible drunk with PTSD from World War II, who makes a surprising connection with this guy who is leading kind of what's a stand-in for Scientology, and the performances are just stellar. I don't necessarily want to get into spoilers with like these kinds of videos, but the film almost has a circular nature about it. It feels like you're back at the start of the film almost by the end of the film. And it doesn't do that by playing with time or anything. It's not like told out of order or anything. It's not like a Nolan film that just plays with time. It's more it's straightforward. Like, I wasn't confused necessarily when watching the film. I just wasn't entirely sure that I knew what it was about. Um, but or not necessarily what it was about, but what the point was, I guess. And I think it's a movie where you have to dig in and find your own point. Um, and I liked it a lot. I kind of I vibed with it. It's got two particular scenes that I think are just amazing. Um, Both of them are Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix, like, conversing in some way. One is like a fight, and then another is an interview. And both are so engaging to watch that you are just sucked in, and it's amazing. I love it. After The Master, I watched Django Unchained, which is my fourth Tarantino film. I've really enjoyed every Tarantino film that I've seen. This is probably my favorite. It's about Jamie Foxx, who plays Django. He is an ex-slave who got freed by Christoph Waltz's character, who is a bounty hunter, and also a sympathizer for slaves and the like. And so Christoph Waltz frees Django and basically tasks him with helping him do bounties. And then Django has his own personal journey of finding his wife and saving her. From Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Candy, I think was his name, or his nickname anyway. It is the one Tarantino film where I feel like it has, like, an actual emotional core to it. I haven't seen Kill Bill or Inglourious Basterds, but Django Unchained, in particular, it felt like it had this emotional core to it, where you're following this character who has a very clear motivation. A lot of Tarantino's films that I've seen, there's not as clear of motivation for the characters. They're just kind of going about their day or doing things, and you're just kind of following them doing their things. But like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in particular, it does not have like a typical act structure or anything. It's more almost vignettes about the two characters and the adventures that they go on. Django Unchained is much more of a typical story, I think. And I think that's why some people might not necessarily like it, like Tarantino fans in particular, because it isn't necessarily a radically new or different movie. I think how it executes its story and how it tells its story is done so well, and I think that Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz and Leonardo DiCaprio all give amazing, jaw-dropping performances almost, and the action is insane and horrifically violent, but it's horrifically violent, but in a very cartoonish way, almost. Like, whenever there's a headshot and all the blood splats everywhere, it doesn't seem realistic, but it's still horrifying. I feel like I can connect to Django in a much more personal way than I can connect with most of Tarantino's other characters, except for maybe Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, can connect to, because he's kind of he feels kind of lost in his career and what he's doing. He doesn't quite understand where he's going in life and what he wants to do. But I liked Django Unchained a lot. In fact, I think it's probably my favorite from this week that I've watched. And last, and probably least, is Fantastic Planet. Fantastic Planet is a French film from the 70s. It is animated. Well, kind of in the same style as those old Monty Python animations. And it is pure nightmare fuel. There's some horrifying stuff here. It's not a kids' animated film. It has a very distinct style and tone. It is about this far-off planet where humans are kind of treated like pests, like rodents almost, by these giant blue aliens, giant to us, to humans, and kind of there's not like a strong plot for this film either, but there's also not really character to this film, which I feel like might give away how I kind of feel about the movie. I don't like... I like the movie, but I don't necessarily love it. I respect it more than I like it, if that makes sense. It comes across more as like an old fairy tale where, you know, it's more about the moral of the story. But the animation is incredible. The designs for all the alien life is incredible. The soundtrack is so 70s, like, experimental, bizarre. I almost would expect, like, Pink Floyd to do the soundtrack for this movie. It 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 feels like something that I should have been, like, under the influence of something in order to enjoy more, because it is trippy, it is horrific, it is inspiring in a way too. Just the imagination that it took to create this vision of this planet. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It is not a film for everybody, but it is an important film, and it is an important animated film. And so I do have to recommend it to an extent. Like, if you are a film buff like me, it is well worth watching. It is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's influential, but it's one of those things where I feel like some of it does bleed into certain other films. So it is worth watching on that. It is worth watching in that aspect. But that's about it for this week. Well, that is it for this week. That's what I watched. Join me next week, where I will talk about what I watched next week. I never go into a week knowing what I'm going to watch, so should be bizarre, weird, and interesting. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with my weekly updates for my filmography. Not my filmography, but watching what films I've watched, if you're interested. And if you're looking for any sort of recommendations, yeah, click subscribe to keep up to date with that, and click like if you liked the video, of course.